Hi everyone, I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Today, I want to talk about the 5 cons of being a consultant. Now, I'm talking mainly about independent consulting, and you may have seen my previous video where I talk about there are 6, 7, 8 different types of consultant that may exist. This kind of spheres into somebody who's working a 9 to 5, so that's more of the consultant mindset. This is also somebody who works inside of IR35, which is not quite a consultant, if I'm honest with you, same as the first. The third is somebody who works outside of IR35, and that's a true independent consultant. That's where it begins. You got procurement consultants, so somebody who bids for services for organizations publicly or privately. Then you have the freelance consultant, an individual who essentially finds their own deals. Maybe they do sort of like workshops or whatever it may be to essentially show their value, and then they close the deal afterwards. And you've got marketplace consultants. Okay, so there are different types, but essentially I want to talk about the cons. Now, I'm thinking more about based on my own experience, I'm more of an outside of IR35 consultant, but also I dabble in a few things here and there. So I could argue a bit of freelance as well. So the first thing I'd say is there may be inconsistent income based on economic sensitivity. What does this specifically mean? Well, in a country, you've got different types of demand. You've got demand and supply. Okay, so essentially, demand is there is a group of individuals, an organization or group of organizations, people who want a specific result or value. Okay, that's what demand is. And so the supply bit is your ability to meet that demand, to basically provide that value, to show that result or whatever it may be. And so the more demand you have, the better it is for those who are suppliers. Okay. However, if demand is less, and it means that people are not looking for that value as much, then it's difficult for the suppliers. And of course, you have to think about relatively what is bigger, the supply side or the demand side. If you got huge supply and small demand, then what does that do? It increases competition. And so naturally, you have to find ways to differentiate yourself, in order for you to stand out and be seen as an individual who is valuable. Now, of course, you have to actually be valuable, because some people say, oh, let me just play the game, perception, blah, 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 have a good brand. Yeah, great. But if you do all of that stuff, you get accepted, and then you do a bad job, and you do it again and again and again, you got no real testimonials or no evidence to suggest that you were the right person for the role. Okay. Now, there is a certain degree to everything is figure outable, and you probably should have the right level of willpower in order to affect that. But it does make sense to have some sort of experience, solid experience. And typically, a minimum of 5 to 10 years is what a consultant starting out may have. Now, of course, if you're freelance, that may be slightly different, because this may be through developing a comprehensive and sophisticated set of education, so to speak. And some people will say that actually forget all of that sophisticated and comprehensive education piece. This is just like, I just want to do this sort of thing. There's also that side as well. But I say this to say that if demand is low, it's difficult. And right now within the UK, we have a situation where productivity is low. We have a situation where there is a focus heavily on AI, focus on the finance sector, focus on services, and not necessarily elsewhere. We have a focus on healthcare as another example. So it would suggest that there are key areas that are less affected by some of the changes that have been happening globally, namely by inflation, interest rates, and energy and transport, which means that they may be okay to a degree, but there are other areas that are heavily affected. So the niche that you're in may be more economically sensitive to these different things, which may mean that your income is less stable. Now, of course, income instability also comes based on the fact that you may be let go from your contract for whatever reason. Most contracts are anywhere between 0 to 4 weeks in terms of notice period, and that's negotiated by you depending on what your setup is. You may have to stop for whatever circumstances. Okay, there may be things that just come up where you just have to stop. Maybe you know you've got a new baby, or maybe there's a health risk, or maybe you've got a dependent that you need to look after. There's all of this stuff to bear in mind. So you can already think, what are some of the things I need to do? You know, thinking about insurance, emergency funds, having other types of work. And this is where the whole portfolio career and or entrepreneurship thing comes into play, because you're like, one income is not enough, but then you need to focus on one thing, but then you're also thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, even if I do make more money, I'm going to be taxed more, which means I'm not even keeping enough. There's all this stuff to think about. So you have to think strategically about what you're aiming to do. So you have to bet on yourself. But it's a con for people who may want to jump into this place but are scared because of the fact that there is income inconsistency. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to say is, based on that, it may mean that actually, even though you're seeking work-life balance, you may not get the work-life balance that you're seeking. Because you're trying to over-deliver, you're trying to do all these different things, it may lead to stress and burnout and anxiety or overwhelm. Think about what I just said. If demand is low and supply is high, that increases competition, which means you just have to be better. And if you were better before, can you get even better? The ambitious will say, yes, there's always a way to improve. And others will be like, yes, but that's going to be bloody difficult. And then the others will say, oh man, yeah, I can't, this is long. I mean, what? This is long. I don't think I can give any more. So there are all these things to think about as well. So even though it could lead to better life balance, it doesn't necessarily mean it will. You may be doing more. And you have to balance that between whether this is ambition talking, okay, or whether this is because of demand. Okay, the lack of it, okay, making you feel like you have to sort of like do loads of things at one time and all that kind of stuff there. So this is all stuff to think about. So you may have limited work-life balance, but one thing I will say is I don't believe in balance per se. I believe more in alignment. I feel like there's a healthier word. Balance would suggest that there is a right proportion of things that you need to do. And this still aligns to alignment, so to speak. But with alignment, it's more like your heart sings to it. It is complementary to it. It's synchronous to it. It's harmonious towards it. Now, it may not be the thing you actually want to do, but there is a better feeling that you are doing the right thing. You know, you're making the money that you want to make. You're progressing. You're doing whatever needs to be done, as opposed to this tug and pull and you're not getting any sort of like feedback towards what you're doing. So I think alignment is better. It should align. And so therefore, naturally, it will align to this level of prioritization, which you could argue links to balance. Okay, so this is all semantics. So work-life balance could be affected. The other thing I'd say is there is a higher administrative burden. Okay. Now this is probably more specific to the outside IR35 contractor, but you should still have the same level of due diligence, whatever type of contract work you are doing. But essentially, like, of course, if you are outside of IR35, okay, or working under your limited company, if that sounds simpler, then you have to think about filing taxes. You know, you have to think about capturing business expenses. You have to think about other subcontractors that you may bring on board. You have to think about what sort of structure do you want. There's thinking about VAT liability, okay, or personal tax, or corporation tax. There are all these different things to think about, and not just think about. There's bookkeeping you need to do. You know, you need to set yourself up in such a way where you can manage the stuff. Now, some people may say, well, you can get QuickBooks to do all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And all. Yeah, you can do some of it, but you still need to be involved. You are liable for your taxes. And so if you're not putting money away, maybe in a high interest savings account, okay, or cash ISA or whatever it may be, or just not putting away at all, and that tax bill comes, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I'm telling you. My friend was telling me some stories, boy. So I learned quick. To make sure that I position myself as best as possible. I remember, quick story, I tried to do the whole filing my taxes thing back in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. And I got punished for it. On 2 occasions, I got a penalty. I had to pay £100, then £200, and then they gave me a warning. And I thought, what? I thought this stuff was easy. There's a reason why you have accountants. So, of course, accountants alleviate the burden if you have the right type of accountant who understands your needs. But you are still responsible. There is still a responsibility that you have. So bear that in mind. There is all of that stuff to bear in mind. And of course, the thing related to the whole administrative burden is that even though you can be more tax efficient, and I talk about this stuff, and other accountants talk about this stuff, and other self-employed individuals, and blah, 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 it feels like you're jumping through hoops. This is why you need an accountant. So you'll still make more money, but you're still jumping through hoops in order to make sure that you efficiently get taxed appropriately, so that you can keep the money you keep. Otherwise, there'd be no point. So you have to have that level of knowledge, understanding, support from professional experts in order for you to be taxed efficiently. Okay, so bear all that stuff in mind. So, one thing that I did, which really helped, was I really tried to understand my previous pay slips. So understanding national insurance more, income tax, pension contributions, salary sacrifice and how it was set up, all those different things. And then I compared it to my setup now, and just tried to break it down to understand what was expected of me. So there's all of that to bear in mind. And sometimes you may get a random tax bill depending on the type of tax setup you're in. So, even though I am being taxed as a self-employed individual, because I was inside of IR35 a couple of years back, not too many years back, essentially what happened was, because I was in a certain bracket, whatever it may be, you get taxed differently. It doesn't just come out of your sort of like your weekly pay, so to speak. This is a separate thing. You have to pay a lump sum, which in my mind I wasn't aware of at the time. So you have to be vigilant, is what I'm saying. You have to be vigilant. And if you've got things to pay for, if you have the opportunity to go on holiday, okay, it's a luxury right now, or if you have the opportunity to do other sort of things, and then this bill comes up, it can be a lot. It can be a lot. Another thing that I'd mention, I've got a couple of lists here, and I'm kind of like dipping and diving between the two. The other thing I'll mention is that you get a lack of employee benefits. Okay. Now, as an inside IR35 contractor, if you'll be working underneath an umbrella company, which is basically a company that just deals with all the sort of like expenses and tax stuff when you're working inside of IR35. And for those who don't know, you're just basically taxed like an employee as a contractor. Okay, but you do get some benefits there. So when I had an umbrella company, essentially the benefits would look like free online GP consultations, which came very handy actually when I was actually very ill. There's also discounts on different sort of like well-known brands and all of that kind of stuff there. There is also financial services. I think they're either discounted or you get a limited version of it. You also get a pension, a work pension. So they all run it for you and all that kind of stuff there. And there are a few others. I think there's a mental health and therapy sort of like line as well that's available. So there are some benefits for the inside IR35 contractor, okay? But if you're outside of IR35 or anything above, you have to do it all yourself. And this is why you become your own financial guru. Thinking about insurance, whether this is income insurance, health insurance, life insurance, buildings insurance, which you have to have, or home insurance, which is slightly different, which is contents insurance essentially. You've also got to think about your pension. Do you have a self-invested private pension set up, or is your thing in a trust? Is that appropriately set up, etc., etc.? Like, what benefits do you have to ensure that if anything was to happen, or if you needed certain stuff, you were set up the right way? Okay, so think about all this kind of stuff. I remember speaking to my cousin-in-law, and she works within the financial sector, and I asked her, would you ever go contracting or independent consulting? She's like, do you know what, for now I wouldn't, because she loves the benefits too much. So benefits will keep individuals within a specific space, which is perfectly fine. This is about design for you. This is why I talk about the portfolio career as opposed to just contracting or independent consulting. It is like, how are you designing it? You know, if the benefits make sense for you and you feel that there is a sense of stability, so to speak, in where you're working, then stay there, if that makes sense. And I guess the final thing that I want to highlight is the fact that in some instances there may be a high level of demand or pressure. And this pressure could come in different ways. So number one, pressure to perform because you are the expert. And therefore you may provide pressure on yourself, especially if you're first starting. You may be like, oh my gosh, can I actually do this? And if you've done this for like, let's say 10 years, of course you can. You're just in a different environment. So you have to be able to set yourself up in such a way where you have the right processes, templates, whatever it may be, to support your endeavors. This is why I love generative AI, because it can initially do the brainstorming, but it won't do all of the heavy lifting by any means. Just never rely on it to do that stuff. Okay. So that's one type of pressure. Another type of pressure is you may be part of a really big and complex program, project, set of deliverables, whatever it may be. So there's a lot that just needs to be done. And although that you may not necessarily have line management or, you know, have to work a certain time, whatever it may be, you may be overworking. Okay, so there is that to consider as well. I guess the third thing is the social climate. The social climate, which is kind of linking into a bonus that I might talk. It's not really a bonus, but just an additional one. It doesn't have to be 5. But it leans into the fact that it's very hard at times to get everyone to understand your positioning. Okay, which leads on to the 6th thing, which is centered around people within the organization will either like you or not like you at all. Because you're not part of the culture or part of the politics, you're just an outsider. You're just some guy doing some, what hopefully could be some helpful work to that organization. Some people may see you as taking their job. You don't really know what you're talking about. Just some person just trying to make crazy amounts of money, doesn't really care. And therefore you're targeted at times. You know, you're just assumed to be a certain type of person. You don't really understand. And the person or people who may feel this way may be valid for some individuals. But for those independent consultants who are genuinely trying to incite change, of course, it's not nice to hear. And it's a shame, actually, that you can't just have the right type of working relationship. Because you have to remember, it is the end client who calls in these consultants, these contractors. They believe that they don't have the capacity or capability or skills to do the complex piece of work that is required to deliver on something. And usually that's before a program starts, or sometimes during a program, whatever it may be. But then there are people in an organization who may be like, we can do this stuff, you know. And what's interesting about all of it is that, let's say for the public sector, and I'm not talking about like firm consultants, by the way, which we typically know about. I say the big 4 and 5, but I don't have anything against them per se. It's just because this is what we know in terms of consultant in our heads. But I'm talking about pure independence, okay? People who may come through recruiting agencies, other consultancies, or just may broker the deals themselves directly. Where was I landing with this? Even though in the public sector, at least, taxpayers' money is used to pay for these consultants, the consultant mindset is taxpayers' money is being spent here, so we need to do this properly. That is the pressure that is created. There are multiple consultants that I work with who all say the same thing, and avidly. They're like, look, this is taxpayers' money, so we need to make sure there is integrity behind the decision making of why we are going down this certain route. So what ends up happening is that you may have over governance or the right type of governance, just to ensure that if if an FOI came out, freedom of information request came out, there was the adequate level of transparency, decision making, governance to support stuff that being made. But the appreciation for that stuff is lost because some bigwiggers come in to try and take all the money. And this is why I say there's always going to be a need for a consultant or a contractor of some degree, because there is. You can't just necessarily believe that you'll have all the knowledge and all the understanding within one space. As individuals, we don't have that, let alone organizations. But you can work towards that capability. And in some instances, in many for some, a consultant or contractor can support that. So the con is the perception and outlook that one may have over you can sometimes come with prejudgment. And the way I've mitigated against that is just to be myself, just to be open and transparent, and try to be as amicable as possible or likable as possible, whatever it may be. Not big in it, but just being a nice person. So those were 5 plus 1, 6 different cons of independent consulting. And I'd love to know if you're an independent consultant or wanting to be an independent consultant or encountered any of these individuals, what your thoughts are on all of this stuff. So comment below if you can. If you want to see more videos centered around portfolio careers, independent consulting, soft economics, all that kind of stuff there, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.